Maggie had never been to her grandmother's house in the countryside. Her mother, Sarah, had always talked about it as a magical place, filled with stories of old dolls and secret passageways. Now, as Sarah and Maggie stood outside the old house, Maggie felt a sense of unease. The house was old and eerie, surrounded by an overgrown garden.
Come on, Maggie. Don't be scared.
Sarah said, her voice full of excitement.
We're going to have so much fun cleaning out the house and discovering all the treasures your grandmother left behind.
Maggie nodded, but she couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that was gnawing at her. As they stepped inside, she immediately felt a chill run down her spine. The house was dark and musty, and the only sound was the creaking of the wooden floors beneath their feet.
Let's start in the living room,
Sarah said as she began to pull the curtains open, letting in some light. As they began to move things around, Maggie noticed something strange. It was a doll, an old porcelain doll that had been hidden away in a corner of the room. Its eyes seemed to follow her as she moved around the room, and she couldn't help but feel like it was watching her every move.
Mom, did you see that?
Maggie asked, pointing at the doll.
What, honey?
Sarah asked, distractedly.
I'm trying to sort through these papers.
That doll over there.
Maggie said, pointing again.
Its eyes moved. I swear they did.
Sarah shook her head.
Maggie, you're just being silly. Dolls don't move. Now come on, let's get to work.
As they moved to the next room, Maggie couldn't help but feel like she was being watched. Every time she turned around, she saw the dolls staring at her with their lifeless eyes. But when she tried to tell her mother, Sarah dismissed her concerns.
Maggie, stop it. We don't have time for your imagination. We have work to do.
Maggie sighed, feeling frustrated and alone. She had always been the sensitive one, the one who saw things others didn't. But now, it seemed like her mother didn't believe her anymore. As they moved through the house, the dolls seemed to multiply. They were everywhere, in every corner, on every shelf. Maggie couldn't escape their eyes, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that they were watching her every move.
Mom, can we please leave?
Maggie asked, her voice shaking.
I don't like it here. Something's not right.
But Sarah was already deep in the task of sorting through the old trinkets and treasures that her mother had left behind. She didn't seem to hear her daughter's plea, and Maggie was left to face the dolls alone. As the day wore on, Maggie grew more and more anxious. The dolls seemed to be closing in on her, and she couldn't escape their gaze. She tried to stay close to her mother, but Sarah was always distracted by the task at hand. Suddenly, one of the dolls moved. Maggie gasped, but Sarah didn't seem to notice.
Mom, please, can we go now?
Maggie begged.
I don't feel safe here.
Sarah sighed, her patience running thin.
Maggie, we can't just leave. We have a lot of work to do, and we can't waste time because you're scared.
Maggie nodded, feeling defeated. She knew that her mother wouldn't believe her, and she felt trapped in the house with the dolls. As they moved to the next room, Maggie felt like the dolls were getting closer, their eyes following her every move. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the task at hand, but the feeling of unease grew stronger. Suddenly, one of the dolls lunged at her, its porcelain fingers clawing at her face. Maggie screamed, but Sarah didn't seem to hear her over the sound of her own work.
Maggie, what's wrong now?
She asked, exasperated.
The dolls, they're alive.
Maggie yelled, trying to push the doll away, but Sarah just laughed.
Don't be ridiculous, Maggie. Dolls can't come to life.
But as they turned around, the dolls were moving. They were crawling on the floor, their eyes glowing in the dim light. Maggie tried to run, but she stumbled and fell, the dolls closing in on her.
Mom!
Maggie screamed, but it was too late. The dolls had captured her, their porcelain hands dragging her into the darkness. Sarah searched the house frantically, calling out for her daughter, but there was no answer, only the sound of the dolls moving in the darkness.
Maggie, where are you?
She called out, her voice trembling, but there was no answer, only the sound of the dolls cackling in the darkness. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, realizing that she had been wrong all along. The dolls were alive, and they had taken her daughter. She searched the house, moving from room to room, her heart pounding in her chest. But there was no sign of Maggie, only the dolls watching her every move. Suddenly she heard a sound, a faint whisper in the darkness at the end of the hall. There she saw Maggie, transformed into a doll. Her face was frozen in porcelain, her eyes lifeless and empty. Sarah gasped, realizing what had happened. The dolls had taken her daughter, transforming her into one of their own. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she realized that she had failed her daughter. From that day on, the dolls ruled the old house in the countryside. their laughter echoing through the halls. And Sarah knew that she would never forget the day that she lost her daughter to the dolls.